Coming up today, ending months of taxing negotiations, South Korea's ruling and opposition parties have finally agreed on a way to redraw the nation's electoral districts for the general election in mid-April. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is on a three-day trip to the United States to discuss North Korea's nuclear and missile issues with John Kerry. First, the US and Russia have announced that a cessation of hostilities in Syria should go into effect in 4 days' time, but the two main jihadist groups are not part of the truce agreement. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Tuesday, the 23rd of February. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. We begin with the latest development at the National Assembly, where lawmakers have reached a long-awaited compromise this morning on the shape of the country's electoral map, ahead of a general election set for mid-April. For more, we go over to our Shin Se-min, who's standing by at the National Assembly in Seoul for us. So, Se-min, what can you tell us about this deal?
Hi, Mark. It's a deal that's been in the months of making. Now, exactly 50 days before the April 13th general elections, the rival parties now have their new electoral map. Now, the agreement came from a meeting from this morning between the Assembly Speaker GeunHyes and the leaders of the two main rival parties. Now, here's what they have agreed on. They will keep the number of Assembly seats to 300, but have decided to allocate 253 seats to district representatives, up from the current 246, and 47 to proportional representatives. Now, the map, which expired at the end of last year, was redrawn to reflect the changes in the population. Now, based on that, districts in Gangwon-do, Jeollabuk-do, Jeollanam-do, and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces got smaller, while those in Gyeonggi-do and Chungcheongnam-do provinces and in major cities like Incheon, Daejeon, and in the capital Seoul have increased. And until early this morning, there were concerns that if the parties fail to redraw the map by today, then the April election may get postponed or at least get chaotic. But with the new deal, the deal has prevented that from happening now. Now, with the agreement, the National Election Commission is meeting this afternoon to review the deal, which is expected to be put to a vote by the full Assembly on Friday.
So, Se-min, with the deal struck between the two parties, does this now mean that we can expect more agreements on the other contentious bills that have also been stalled there in Parliament?
That's right. Long-pending bills like the counterterrorism and economy-related labor reform and the service sector are still waiting for approval. Now, I should mention this now, as the disagreements between the two rival parties on the issue of counterterrorism had been the main sticking point for the electoral map. But with bills until late last night. Now, the ruling party had wanted the two bills to be put up for a vote at the same time, while the opposition wanted the electoral map considered first. But we just learned a little less than an hour ago that the Assembly Speaker GeunHyes is going to use his authority as Speaker to introduce the counterterrorism bill for a full floor vote this afternoon. Now, the bill would establish a counterterrorism center within the country's top spy agency, the National Intelligence Service, among other things. Also, during the session, lawmakers will vote on a bill aimed at improving North Korean human rights and a few non-contentious bills. That's all I have for now, but I'll be following the developments throughout the day, and we'll have more updates in our later newscast. This is Shin Se-min reporting from the National Assembly.
Thank you, Se-min, for that report. Now, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi will meet with US Secretary of State John Kerry in Washington on Tuesday, on the first day of his three-day visit to the United States. Beijing's foreign ministry says the two will exchange their stance on the North Korean nuclear issue. The meeting comes as the UN Security Council is in the final stages of drafting a new resolution against North Korea's latest provocations, the nuclear test and the long-range missile launch. Watchers say the meeting between Yi and Kerry may be the last round of negotiations on the adjustment of the level of sanctions on Pyongyang, which is the main reason for why this adoption is taking so long. The State Department says other issues up for discussion will include the territorial claims in the South China Sea, climate change and cyber security. President Park Geun-hye will mark the start of her 4th year in office on Thursday. To mark the occasion, we are broadcasting a series of reports about her successes and failures over the last 12 months and a look at what might be in store going forward. Second up is the President's handling of diplomatic matters. Kwon So-ah has this report.
Some 30 overseas trips in 3 years, more than any other South Korean president in history. Efforts to bolster Korea's relations with its foreign partners, building international consensus on reunification of the two Koreas, and cooperation on denuclearizing the North have been key goals on the Park administration's diplomatic front. The terms summit diplomacy, sales diplomacy, and unification diplomacy have been omnipresent during President Park's 3 years in office. This concentration on diplomatic performance reinforced relationships with the U.S., assessed as being at an all-time high, as well as with China, particularly on business matters, with the effectuation of the Seoul-Beijing Free Trade Agreement.
She seems to have a pretty good relationship with Barack Obama. But other than that, I would have to just say that the relationship with China is the biggest one, which is appropriate because China is becoming more and more important to the South Korean economy and South Korean politics in general. China is often pointed to as the country that has the most influence over North Korea.
But in the wake of North Korea's recent nuclear and long-range missile tests, some experts say President Park Geun-hye's shift to a more hardline policy based on sanctions against Pyongyang indicates that Seoul may be turning its back on Beijing.
I think now she's moving towards some different trajectory of her policies, so that the resultant objective of her policy would be more pragmatic rather than something based upon a trust or some higher expectations on other neighboring superpowers. Some recommendations I have is, why don't we have South Korea, North Korea, U.S. trilateral dialogue?
While North Korea remains under the international spotlight, follow-up measures to the so-called comfort women issue, including Japan's denying of the existence of records on the military's forced recruitment of wartime sex slaves, and ongoing talks between Seoul and Beijing on a maritime demarcation line, are other challenges that must be addressed during the remainder of President Park Geun-hye's term in office. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, a new report from the OECD attempts to measure the good jobs in a country, and Korea is not really doing so well at all. The average hourly wage workers receive here remained rooted in the lower rank among the 33 member nations surveyed. Wang Yi has all the figures.
Roughly $14.50. That's how much the average Korean worker earns in an hour, which is only about half of what workers in Germany make. According to a job quality report by the OECD, Korea's purchasing power parity adjusted gross hourly earnings ranked 22nd, remaining in the lower tier among the 33 member countries. Topping the list were European countries like Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Switzerland, while Mexico sat at the bottom. The OECD's measure gauges how employment contributes to material living conditions, or in other words, workers' well-being, and how the earnings are distributed across the workforce. And experts attribute Korea's rather disappointing scorecard to long working hours coupled with low productivity. The OECD says Korean employees worked for around 2,100 hours on average in 2014, the world's second longest after Mexico, and well over the 1,300 hours German people spent at work that year. Experts add it's inevitable longer working hours will result in slipping productivity. They say local companies should stop insisting on their employees working extreme amounts of overtime. Wang Yi, Arirang News.
Now, fears of a British exit, a Brexit from the European Union, have pushed the pound to a 7-year low as the British Prime Minister clashed with the London Mayor in Parliament on Monday. The bout is likely a sign of the heated debates to come, with exactly 4 months to go until the British public votes on whether to stay in or leave the EU. GeunHyes reports.
British Prime Minister David Cameron and London Mayor Boris Johnson went head-to-head in the House of Commons on Monday.
Can I ask my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, to explain to the House and to the country in exactly what way this deal returns sovereignty over any field of lawmaking to these Houses of Parliament?
This deal brings back some welfare powers because it carves us forever out of ever closer union. It means that the ratchet of the European Court taking power away from this country cannot happen in future.
The London Mayor sparked the confrontation by backing a British exit from the European Union on Sunday, less than a day after Cameron had encouraged Britain to remain, while also announcing the date for a referendum on the issue on June 23rd. About half of the ruling Conservative Party, of which the Mayor is a member, is reportedly ready to back a Brexit, in line with the British public opinion. With the prospect of that currently too close to call, 4 months of intense debate and campaigning is expected. Fears of a Brexit also hit the British currency. The pound dropped to a 7-year low against the US dollar on Monday, marking a 3% drop since the beginning of the year and making the pound the worst performing major currency of 2016 so far. Ratings agency Moody's also warned that Britain's strong credit score would be at risk if the public votes to leave the EU, saying the potential cost of leaving would outweigh the benefits. Arirang News.
Now, could there be the faintest hope to an end to the bloodshed in Syria? Warring parties in the country have around 4 days to sign up for a proposed US-Russia truce. If adhered to, the deal could bring some much-needed respite to the people of Syria, but the bombs will keep falling on Islamic State and al-Nusra. Our Kim Mok-yeon reports.
The United States and Russia on Monday announced their plans for a cessation of hostilities in Syria beginning February 27th. The announcement follows telephone talks between Presidents Obama and Putin. The initial term of the truce has been set at 3 weeks, with the possibility of extensions. Warring parties will indicate their agreement to the U.S. and Russia by noon on Friday, Damascus time, and the truce would go into effect at midnight. The two countries excluded militants from the Islamic State and other terrorist groups such as the Nusra Front from the ceasefire. They will continue to be bombed by Moscow and Washington. The U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said the deal will lead to a decline in violence and allow the delivery of humanitarian supplies to besieged areas. President Putin also expressed his strong commitment to the agreement.
By noon of February 26, 2016, all sides fighting in Syria have to confirm with us or our American partners their commitment to ceasefire. Russian and American military will jointly define the territories on the map where such groups are active.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon also welcomed the latest development.
The Secretary General believes the agreement, if respected, would constitute a significant step forward in the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2254.
The UN estimates at least 250,000 people have been killed and some 11 million displaced since Syria's civil war began in early 2011. Kim Mok-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, virtual reality devices and 5G networks have been taking centre stage at the biggest mobile tech show of the year, the Mobile World Congress, which kicked off officially in Barcelona on Monday. Our Kim Ji-yeon is there, and she filed this report.
Mobile is everything. This is the theme for this year's Mobile World Congress. It conveys that innovation in the mobile sector is reaching into our daily lives, and that there are very few things being created today that don't somehow have a mobile component to them, and this includes the virtual reality sector. This year's MWC has put the spotlight on VR devices, so it's no surprise the world's largest smartphone maker, Samsung Electronics, has its own VR experience corner. At Samsung's 4D Experience Center, visitors wait in a long line so they can take a virtual ride on a snow vehicle or roller coaster. Users put on their Gear VR headsets, which generate 360-degree images with every move and turn that's made. The Korean tech giant is eyeing the VR sector for growth, teaming up with Facebook for its VR contents. Still, the VR sector remains in its infant stage and needs more user-friendly VR devices and faster connectivity to produce higher resolutions. For that, companies like Korea-based SK Telecom have introduced a 5th-generation 5G network, an improved version from the current 4th-generation LTE network.
So more than 100 times rather than 4G network. So it should be. So for example, if you download the HD movie parts, if you use the LTE network, so you can spend around 60 seconds or so around 1 minute. But if you use the 5G network, so within 1 second you can download it.
Another company that's providing 5G connectivity is US-based Qualcomm. They say their annual trip to Barcelona is a great business opportunity.
So we actually speak to operators and vendors from around the world throughout the year. But Mobile World Congress gives us a really great opportunity where we can have influential members from all these communities all in one place. It makes it easy for us to display all the great things we're working on all in one place, rather than have them travel around the world at different times.
SK Telecom and its local rival KT Corporation led discussions at the MWC to formulate a global standard platform for the 5th-generation network ahead of the 2018 Winter Olympics that will be hosted by South Korea's alpine town of Pyeongchang. The companies plan to provide full 5G services at sporting venues during the Games. Kim Jeon, Arirang News, Barcelona.
Well, that's all we have for now. Do have a wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye.